Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are looking at something really strange that's happening with Australia's online policy. See, on one hand, the government has been telling you for years to guard your digital identity like it's gold. But on the other hand, they're now pushing a law that might just force you to prove who you are just to log into social media. I mean, think back to 2022. The message coming from the very top was crystal clear, right? Be suspicious. Be super vigilant. Don't you dare share your data. The internet was basically painted as this giant minefield, and your identity was the number one target. And that brings us to the big question, doesn't it? How on earth did we get from a place of never ever share your ID to, hey, you might need to prove your age? It's a massive U-turn. So let's dig in and unravel how this happened. To really get what's going on, we have to jump in a time machine and go back to 2022. It was a time of, well, a national cyber panic where it seriously felt like Australia's digital walls were just crumbling down. It was just relentless. It felt like a cascade of failures. First it was Optus, then boom, Medibank, then Latitude Financial and others. It was this rapid-fire series of absolutely devastating data breaches that sent the whole country into a full-blown cybersecurity crisis. And the scale of this was just staggering. The Optus breach alone, we're talking about the personal details of nearly 10 million Australians. All of a sudden, identity theft wasn't this far-off abstract threat. No, it was a top-tier national security problem. And millions of us felt completely and totally exposed. And out of that crisis, this powerful new idea started to take hold. The thinking went like this. For a company, holding on to your passport or your driver's license details wasn't an asset at all. It was a huge liability. This data was now being called toxic assets. It was like radioactive material that just attracted hackers and pretty much guaranteed a disaster if it ever got out. So, faced with this massive crisis, something pretty rare happened. Politicians from both sides of the aisle actually united. They dropped their usual political fighting and started sounding the alarm with one single urgent message for all of us. You had the Communications Minister, Michelle Rowland, who really became a champion for this idea of data minimisation. Her argument was incredibly simple. The only data that's truly safe is the data you never collect or the data you get rid of the second you're done using it. And then from the other side of politics, you had then opposition leader Peter Dutton. He used the crisis to attack the government, sure, but listen to his language. It was reinforcing the exact same fear. He painted this picture of a nation that was totally vulnerable, calling all of us sitting ducks. And David Coleman, the Shadow Minister for Communications, he really brought home the devastating human cost of all this. He started sharing these awful stories from his constituents, people who were financially ruined, and made it so clear this wasn't just some abstract debate about privacy. This was about people's entire lives being torn apart by identity theft. So here's the key takeaway from that time. By the end of this crisis, there was this rock-solid agreement from both sides. The consensus was your ID is a toxic asset. Collecting less data is the only way to be safe. And you, the citizen, you need to be incredibly suspicious of anyone online asking for your documents. But then something changed. The story takes a sharp turn. In 2024, the entire political focus just pivoted almost overnight. The fear of data theft. It was pretty much replaced by a whole new concern, child safety online. And this big shift led to the Online Safety Amendment, which you might know as the Social Media Minimum Age Bill. Its stated goal was to protect the mental health of kids. And it would do that by forcing social media platforms to take reasonable steps to keep anyone under 16 from having an account. Okay, but here's the unavoidable technical catch. You can't just magically filter out a 15-year-old without also checking the age of, well, everyone, a 25-year-old, a 45-year-old, even a 65-year-old. To enforce this rule for kids, you basically have to check everybody's age, and right there, that's the moment. That's where this new law creates a complete head-on collision with every single warning, every piece of advice that these very same politicians had been shouting from the rooftops just a few months earlier. This table just lays out the contradiction perfectly. I mean, look at this. You've got the Prime Minister, a data hack victim himself, now pushing for mass data sharing. Michelle Rowland, the data minimisation champion, agrees with mandating a system that does the exact opposite. And Peter Dutton and David Coleman, who warned us we were all sitting ducks facing financial ruin, have argued that the benefits of this new system somehow outweigh all those risks they were so worried about. Now, this massive flip-flop hasn't gone unnoticed, even inside their own parties. Some politicians, like Senator Alex Antic, a warning that this law is basically a Trojan horse, that it's a sneaky way to end online anonymity and create a situation where we all need a centralised mandatory digital ID. So what does this all mean for you and the real world? Well, it pretty much forces every single Australian who wants to use social media into a really difficult choice. Okay, so the law says platforms can't technically compel you or force you to hand over your government ID. But this creates a classic catch-22. Let's say you try to log in and their first check, like a facial scan, fails. And by the way, these things make mistakes all the time. Well, you're blocked. And your only way to get back in is to then voluntarily upload the very ID they aren't allowed to force you to provide. See the problem? So let's be really clear about this. The choice they're giving you isn't really about if you'll give up your privacy. It's about how you'll do it. Are you going to hand over your biometric face data to some third-party company you've never heard of? Or are you going to hand a copy of your passport, one of those toxic assets, over to a social media giant? This whole system creates these huge new risks. It builds what experts call honeypots, these massive centralized databases of verified identities that are just irresistible targets for hackers. It also makes it possible to link your real-world financial identity directly to your online social life. And on a fundamental level, it really threatens the whole principle of being able to speak anonymously online. So in the end, Australia's political leaders have made a profound choice here. They have essentially placed a bet. They're gambling that protecting children from social media is worth risking every single citizen's digital privacy. And that leaves all of us with a final, pretty unsettling question. In this new digital world that they are building, who is really being kept safe?